He found her half buried in the snow, barely breathing and clutching secrets colder than the storm around them. But when he chose to save her, he became an outlaw overnight. Was it loyalty, love, or something deeper that made him risk it all? The wind howled like a banshee across Caldera Ridge, cutting through Ash Rourke's heavy coat like it was made of paper. Snow whipped around him in blinding sheets, turning the mountain pass into a frozen hell that would claim any man foolish enough to be caught in it after dark. Ash had been foolish before, but never this foolish. His horse, a sturdy bay named Thunder, snorted nervously as they pushed through drifts that reached the animal's belly. They should have turned back hours ago, should have waited out the storm in the last town. But Ash Rourke had never been good at should-haves. That's when he saw her. At first he thought it was just another snow-covered boulder beside the trail, but something about the shape made him look twice. Thunder shied away, sensing something his rider hadn't yet comprehended. Ash dismounted, his boots crunching through the crust, and felt his heart stop. It was a woman curled in a ball against the rocky outcropping, covered in so much snow she looked like a sculpture carved from ice. Her lips were blue-black, her skin the color of old parchment. Frost clung to her eyelashes like tiny diamonds, and when Ash pressed his ear to her chest, he could barely detect the faint flutter of a heartbeat. She was dying, maybe already dead. Any sensible man would have said a prayer and kept riding. The storm was getting worse, and his own cabin was still miles away through treacherous mountain passes. Carrying extra weight would slow them down, maybe get them both killed. But Ash Rourke had stopped being sensible the day he lost everything that mattered to him. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the woman's frozen form, then lifted her onto Thunder's back. She weighed nothing, like a bird with hollow bones, and when her head lolled against his chest, he could feel how cold she was, even through his remaining layers. "Come on, girl," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the woman or his horse. "We're all going home tonight, or none of us are." The ride to his cabin became a nightmare of ice and wind, and the constant fear that the bundle in his arms had stopped breathing. Twice Thunder stumbled in hidden holes, nearly sending them all tumbling down the mountainside. But somehow, through sheer stubborn will and maybe a touch of divine intervention, they made it. Ash kicked open his cabin door and carried the woman straight to his fireplace, laying her on the thick bare rug in front of the crackling flames. Her breathing was so shallow he had to watch carefully to see her chest rise and fall. He didn't know it yet, but saving this woman's life was about to destroy his own. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video. She woke like a cornered animal, all sharp movements and wild eyes, her hand instinctively reaching for something that wasn't there. Ash had been dozing in his chair by the fire when her gasp startled him awake. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the flickering flames. "Easy now," Ash said softly, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "You're safe. You were half frozen in the snow. Been unconscious for near 18 hours. The woman's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the rough-hewn walls, the simple furnishings, the rifle hanging over the mantelpiece. She tried to sit up and immediately winced, her hand going to her ribs. "Where am I?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw from cold and exhaustion. "My cabin, about 20 miles west of Caldera Ridge. Name's Ash Rourke." He leaned forward slightly. "What's yours?" The woman's face went carefully blank. I can't tell you that. Can't or won't?" She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, and Ash noticed her hands were shaking. Though whether from cold, fear, or something else, he couldn't tell. "There are men looking for me. Bad men. If they knew I was here..." "What kind of bad men?" "The kind that would hurt anyone who helped me." Ash stood and walked to the window, peering out at the snow that was still falling steadily. Well, nobody's tracking anything in this weather. Storm's supposed to last another day or two. He turned back to find her struggling to stand, swaying on unsteady legs. "Where do you think you're going?" "I have to leave. I can't stay here. I won't bring trouble to your door." "Lady, you can barely stand. It's 10 below zero outside, and you don't even have shoes." Ash gestured to her bare feet, which were wrapped in bandages he'd applied to treat the frostbite. "You wouldn't make it 100 yards. She looked toward the door anyway, desperation written across her face. You don't understand. They'll kill you just for talking to me. Who will? But she just shook her head, sinking back down onto the rug. I need to go to the town. Is there a sheriff? A telegraph office? There's both, but no. Her voice was sharp now, panicked. No sheriff, no telegraph. Promise me you won't contact anyone, please. Ash studied her face in the firelight. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and gray eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. There were faded bruises on her face that hadn't come from the cold. All right, he said finally. I won't contact anyone, but you're not leaving until you're strong enough to survive whatever you're running from. That night, Ash woke to the sound of the cabin door creaking open. He grabbed his rifle and crept to the main room, where moonlight streaming through the open doorway illuminated bare footprints in the snow. He found her collapsed just 10 feet from the cabin, unconscious again, her bandaged feet bleeding through the cloth. This time, when he carried her back inside, she was crying. I can't stay, she whispered against his shoulder. But I can't leave either. What am I supposed to do? Ash laid her back down by the fire and rebuilt the flames. You're supposed to trust someone, eventually. Might as well be me. Ash left the woman sleeping by the fire and rode into Caldera Ridge just after dawn, telling himself he only needed supplies. Coffee, hardtack, maybe some proper women's clothing, since her dress was ruined. Normal things. Nothing that would raise suspicions. But Caldera Ridge was buzzing with a different kind of energy that morning. Even before he reached the general store, Ash could see knots of people gathered around, something posted on the community board outside the sheriff's office. Bounty posters, fresh ones. Morning, Ash, called out Tom Fletcher, the store owner. Hell of a storm last night. You weather it okay up in the mountains? Fine enough. Ash nodded toward the crowd. What's got everyone stirred up? New wanted poster came in on yesterday's stage, just before the storm hit. Woman killed a federal marshal down in Dry Butte. Rewards $500. Ash's blood went cold, but he kept his expression neutral. He made his way through the crowd to get a look at the poster. The drawing was rough, but there was no mistaking those gray eyes, that delicate bone structure. The name at the bottom made his heart skip. Delane Mira, wanted for murder. $500 reward. Armed and dangerous. Terrible thing, said a voice behind him. Ash turned to find Sheriff Eldon Voss, a thin man with calculating eyes and a badge that gleamed too bright in the morning sun. Woman who'd kill a lawman in cold blood, she'd kill anyone. You see anything suspicious up in those mountains, Ash? You let me know right away. Course, Sheriff. I mean it. Voss stepped closer, lowering his voice. Got word from Dry Butte that she was seen heading into the high country before the storm. $500 is a lot of money. Ash bought his supplies quickly and was loading them onto his pack horse when he noticed two strangers talking to the blacksmith. They were dressed like traveling merchants, but they moved like gunfighters, weight on the balls of their feet, eyes constantly scanning, hands never far from their weapons. Snowbound woman, he caught one of them saying, might need medical attention. The blacksmith was shaking his head. Ain't seen hide nor hair of any woman. Storm was bad enough to kill anyone caught in it. Ash mounted Thunder and rode out of town at a casual pace, though every instinct screamed at him to run. The ride back to his cabin seemed to take forever. When he finally arrived, he found the door standing open and snow blowing across his floor. Delane was gone. Ash searched the cabin frantically, looking for signs of struggle, blood, anything that might tell him what had happened. But there were no strange boot prints in the snow. No evidence of violence. Just her bare footprints leading away from the cabin toward the creek. He grabbed his rifle and followed the tracks, his heart pounding with each step. If those men had found her, if they had already taken her. But when he rounded the bend in the trail, he stopped short. Delane was standing knee-deep in the icy creek, fully dressed, staring at something in the water. What the hell are you doing? Ash called out. She turned toward him, and he saw that her face was streaked with tears that had frozen on her cheeks. Trying to decide whether drowning would be easier than whatever they'll do to me when they catch me. Get out of that water before you freeze to death. Ash waded into the creek, the icy current shocking even through his thick boots. Whatever you're running from, it can't be worth dying over. Delane didn't move, just stood there shivering in the knee-deep water. You went to town. You saw the poster, didn't you? Yeah, I saw it. Then you know what I am. You know what they're saying I did. Ash reached her and grabbed her arm, pulling her toward shore. I know what they're saying. Doesn't mean I know what really happened. She jerked away from him, and that's when he saw the derringer in her hand, a tiny silver thing, no bigger than her palm, but deadly enough at close range. Don't touch me, I mean it. Easy with that thing. Ash raised his hands, taking a step back. You planning to shoot me now? After I saved your life? I didn't ask you to save me. The words came out raw and desperate. I didn't ask for any of this. You should have left me in the snow. But I didn't, and now we're both stuck with the consequences. They stared at each other across the rushing water, her hand trembling as she held the derringer. Finally, she let the gun drop to her side. My name is Delane Mira, she said quietly, and I didn't kill that marshal. So who did? I don't know, but someone wants me to take the blame for it. She waded out of the creek, water streaming from her sodden dress. Someone powerful enough to make it stick. Back in the cabin, Ash built up the fire, while Delane changed into dry clothes behind a blanket he'd strung up for privacy. Her teeth were chattering so hard he could hear them from across the room. Tell me what really happened, he said when she emerged, wrapped in his spare blanket. I was married to a federal agent named Marcus. He was investigating gold smuggling, supposed to be undercover for a few weeks, but it stretched into months. She sat down by the fire, pulling the blanket tighter. The last letter I got said he'd discovered something big, something that went all the way to the top. Then nothing for 2 weeks. And then Marshal Kinbury showed up with Marcus's badge and a story about how my husband had been shot by smugglers. Said they'd recovered his body, but there wasn't much left to bury. Ash waited, sensing there was more. I didn't believe him. Marcus was too careful to get caught like that. So I started asking questions. That's when the trouble began. Men following me, my room being searched, anonymous letters telling me to stop digging. What kind of trouble? Then Marshal Kinbury was found shot dead in his hotel room, and suddenly I was the prime suspect, because I was seen arguing with him the night before, because I'd been asking questions about Marcus's death. Ash studied her face in the firelight. She was scared, but there was a core of steel underneath. There's one person who might help, she said finally. Wells Kinbury, the marshal's brother. He's a federal agent too, works out of Denver. If anyone would know the truth, it'd be him. Are you willing to bet your life on that? Delane looked him straight in the eye. I already am. The gunshots came just after midnight, shattering the peaceful silence of the mountain cabin like breaking glass. Ash was instantly awake, his hand already reaching for the rifle beside his bed. Through the thin walls, he could hear the distant sound of horses moving through snow. Delane, he hissed, rolling out of bed and grabbing his boots. Get up! We've got company. She was already moving, her survival instinct sharp from weeks on the run. How many? 3 riders, maybe 4. Coming up the south trail, Ash checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded. There's a back window in the bedroom. Can you make it to the trees? Not without you. The cabin door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and snow. 3 men burst through, guns drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. Ash fired from behind the overturned table, his shot taking the first man in the chest. Federal deputies, shouted the second man, a bearded giant with a star pinned to his coat. Surrender now and nobody else has to die. Delane appeared at the bedroom door, her derringer in one hand and Ash's spare pistol in the other. Like hell, she snarled, putting a bullet in the big man's shoulder. The gunfight was brief but vicious, the cabin filled with smoke and thunderous roar of gunfire. Ash dove behind the stone fireplace as bullets shattered everything around him. One deputy tried to flank them through the kitchen, but Delane was waiting. When the shooting stopped, 2 men lay dead on Ash's floor, and the third was crawling toward the door, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Ash caught him before he could reach his horse. Please, the wounded man gasped, his deputy's badge glinting in the moonlight. We were just following orders. Whose orders? Ash grabbed the man's shirt, pulling him up. Who sent you? Marshall. Wells Kinbury. Said she was dangerous. Said she'd kill anyone who tried to help her. Delane appeared beside them, her face white in the moonlight. Wells Kinbury? You're sure? The deputy nodded weakly. Said she already killed his brother. Warned us she might have turned you against us. The man's eyes rolled back, and he went limp in Ash's hands. Jesus, Ash breathed, looking down at the badge on the dead man's chest. We just killed federal deputies. They shot first, Delane said, but her voice was shaking. They came here to kill us. Doesn't matter. Ash stood up, his mind already racing ahead to the consequences. Far as the law's concerned, we just murdered 3 lawmen. There's no coming back from that. They spent the next hour gathering supplies and preparing to abandon the cabin. Ash had lived here for 3 years, carved out a life in these mountains after the war. Now he was giving it all up for a woman he'd known for days. I'm sorry, Delane said as they loaded the horses. This is all my fault. Maybe, but I didn't turn you in when I had the chance. Ash tied down his bedroll and checked his rifle. Question now is what we will do next. We find Wells Kinbury. If he sent those men, he's involved in whatever killed Marcus. They mounted up as dawn broke over the mountains. Behind them, Ash's cabin sat dark and abandoned, 3 bodies growing cold on the floor. Ahead lay nothing but uncertainty and the likelihood that they were both going to die before this was over. They rode hard for 2 days, staying off the main trails and avoiding any sign of civilization. Ash knew these mountains better than most, knew which valleys stayed hidden from casual travelers, but he also knew they couldn't run forever. On the second night, camped in a narrow canyon with no fire and nothing but cold beans for dinner, Delane finally told him the whole truth. My husband wasn't just investigating gold smuggling, she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. He was tracking a network that involved federal marshals, territorial officials, maybe even judges. Money was being moved through official channels, protected by badges and court orders. Ash looked up from cleaning his rifle. How much money? Millions. Marcus said it was the biggest operation he'd ever seen. Gold stolen from miners, skimmed from federal shipments, diverted from tribal payments, all flowing through a network of corrupt officials. And Wells Kinbury was part of it? Has to be. Why else would he send men to kill me? Delane pulled something from inside her jacket, a small leather notebook, barely bigger than her palm. Marcus mailed this to me the week before he died. Inside the job, he wrote, trust no one with a badge. She handed him the notebook, and Ash thumbed through pages of careful handwriting. Names, dates, amounts, routes, a detailed map of corruption that stretched across 3 territories. This is what they're really after, Delane continued. Not revenge for Kinbury's death. This notebook could destroy dozens of careers, maybe bring down the whole network. So why haven't you turned it over to someone clean? There must be honest lawmen somewhere. Who? How do I know which ones are clean and which ones are on the payroll? Marcus thought he was working with honest men, and they got him killed. She took the notebook back, tucking it carefully inside her jacket. Besides, who'd believe the word of a wanted murderer over federal marshals? Ash understood the trap she was in. The very people who were supposed to enforce justice were perverting it, protected by the authority of their badges. There might be a way, he said slowly. I know a man in Larkspur, runs the territorial newspaper. Name's Jim Crawford. Used to be a marshal himself before he got disgusted with corruption and turned to journalism. If anyone would print this story, it'd be him. Do you trust him? As far as I trust anyone these days. Ash stood up, scanning the canyon walls. Larkspur's 3 days' ride southeast. We could make it if we move carefully. And if it's a trap, is this Crawford part of the network? Then we're no worse off than we are now. They broke camp before dawn and began the treacherous journey toward Larkspur. It was slow going, but safer than risking the valleys where posses might be waiting. On the 3rd day, as they crested a ridge overlooking the town, Delane grabbed his arm. Look, she whispered. Even from a distance, Ash could see the unusual activity around the train station. Too many men in dark coats, too many horses, too much organization for a simple cattle town. They're waiting for us, Delane said. We need another plan, Ash replied. But when he turned to discuss options, Delane was already making her way down the ridge toward town. Damn fool woman, he muttered, spurring his horse after her. The Larkspur train station had been transformed into a fortress of lawmen and bounty hunters, all eyes scanning for their quarry. Delane rode straight down the main street like a woman who'd lost her mind, and Ash followed because abandoning her now would be worse than dying with her. That's her, someone shouted as they reached the platform. That's the Mira woman. Gunfire erupted from three directions. Ash dove from his horse, rolling behind freight crates as bullets whined overhead. Delane's horse screamed and went down, pinning her leg beneath its body as armed men converged. Surrender now and we'll make it quick, shouted a familiar voice. Wells Kinbrey stepped out from behind the station house, his marshal's badge gleaming. He was older than his dead brother, with gray hair and eyes like chips of ice. You've caused enough trouble, Mrs. Mira. Go to hell, Delane snarled, struggling to free herself. Ash put a bullet through the nearest bounty hunter's hat, then shifted his aim toward Kinbrey. But there were too many of them, at least 12 men with guns trained on their position. The notebook, Mrs. Mira, Kinbrey continued, walking closer with his gun drawn. Hand it over, and we might let your friend live long enough to see the sunset. Ash counted the odds. Even if he could take down 3 or 4, the rest would cut them both to pieces. He was preparing for his desperate play when a lucky shot from one of Kinbrey's men took him down. The bullet caught Ash in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the freight crates. His rifle went flying, and suddenly he was defenseless, bleeding, watching helplessly as armed men surrounded Delane. Ash! Delane screamed as they dragged her away from the dead horse. Let her go! Ash tried to struggle to his feet, but 2 bounty hunters pressed gun barrels against his head. Kill him, Kinbrey ordered casually. We only need the woman alive long enough to get that notebook. Wait! Delane's voice cut through the chaos. You kill him, and I destroy the notebook right here, right now. I've got matches, and paper burns real easy. Kinbrey held up a hand, stopping his men. You're bluffing. Try me. Delane pulled the leather notebook from her jacket, along with a book of matches. This contains the only copies of my husband's evidence. You want it intact? Let Ash live. The marshal's face twisted with calculation. Fine. Lock them both up. We'll deal with the notebook once we have them secure. As they dragged Delane toward the jail wagon, she managed to catch Ash's eye. Her lips moved silently, forming words only he could see. Find Brannock Toll. Then she was gone, hauled away in chains while Ash was left bleeding in the dirt, surrounded by enemies and facing the impossible task of rescuing her from the most secure jail in 3 territories. But as consciousness faded from blood loss, Ash remembered that name, Brannock Toll, the reclusive blacksmith who lived in the mountains outside Larkspur. A man with his own reasons to hate corrupt lawmen, if Ash could stay alive long enough to reach him. The bounty hunters, thinking him unconscious, turned their attention to celebrating. In their overconfidence, they failed to notice Ash slowly crawling toward the shadows, leaving a trail of blood, but still breathing, still planning. Ash dragged himself through Larkspur's back alleys, his shoulder bleeding freely and vision blurring from blood loss. Every step was agony, but Delane's whispered words kept echoing. Find Brannock Toll. The blacksmith's forge sat 3 miles outside town, hidden in a canyon. Ash had met Toll years ago when they were both running from different kinds of law. The man owed him a favor. He stumbled into Toll's workshop as the sun was setting, collapsing against the doorframe. The blacksmith looked up from his anvil, showing no surprise at finding a bleeding man in his forge. Ash Rourke, Toll said calmly. Been wondering when you'd show up. They got her, Brannock. Wells Kinbrey's got her locked up tighter than a bank vault. Brannock Toll was a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks. He'd been an outlaw once before Ash's intervention had given him a chance to go straight. This the woman with the notebook? That's her, Delane Mira. Toll examined Ash's shoulder wound, cleaning and bandaging it. Kinbrey's got her in the territorial jail. Stone walls 3 feet thick, iron bars, guards at every entrance. Are you saying it can't be done? A slow smile spread across the blacksmith's face. Didn't say that. He pulled back a canvas tarp, revealing dynamite, fuses, and various implements from his outlaw days. They spent an hour planning. The jail had one weakness: the old storm drain running beneath the building. Toll had helped build it years ago. Drain comes up inside the basement, he explained. From there, it's one floor up to the cells. But we'll need a distraction. As midnight approached, they put their plan into action. Tolle made his way to the livery stable while Ash crawled through the storm drain. The tunnel was narrow, filled with debris, and every movement sent fresh pain through his injured body. The explosion lit up the night sky. Half the town's fire brigade rushed toward the blazing stable, including 4 of the 6 jail guards. Ash emerged from the basement and made his way to the cell block. He found Delane in the last cell, bruised but alive. "Ash, how did you—" Questions later. "Moving now." He picked the lock. "Can you walk?" "Better than you can." She supported his good arm. "The notebook." Kinbry took it. "Where?" "His office. But there are copies hidden in different places. The information's safe." They were almost to the storm drain when footsteps echoed behind them. Wells Kinbry appeared with his remaining guards. "Going somewhere?" when the marshal snarled. Before he could draw his gun, the second explosion rocked the building. Toll had saved the biggest stick of dynamite for the jail's front wall, bringing down half the ceiling. In the chaos of falling debris and choking dust, Ash and Delane escaped through the storm drain, emerging where Toll waited with horses. "Time to ride, Mom," the blacksmith said grimly. "Whole territory's going to be hunting you now." 3 days after the jailbreak, Ash and Delane reached Centerville, where Circuit Judge Harrison Blackwood was scheduled to hold court. But Wells Kinbry had anticipated their destination. Armed men surrounded the courthouse. Guards patrolled every street. Kinbry himself stood on the courthouse steps like a general commanding his army. "Must have 30 men down there," Ash said grimly. "We can't wait," Delane replied, clutching the copied notebook pages. "Judge Blackwood leaves tomorrow morning." They'd spent 3 days riding hard, staying ahead of posses. Now the final obstacle seemed insurmountable. "There's another way," Ash said. "Judge Blackwood stays at the Centerville Hotel. Back entrance faces the alley." As darkness fell, they made their move. Ash approached from the north using back alleys. Delane circled south, carrying the evidence. Ash had almost reached the hotel when a familiar voice stopped him. "I thought you might try something like this." Wells Kinbry emerged from the shadows with 2 gunmen. The marshal looked haggard, desperate. "Where's the woman?" Kinbry demanded. "Long gone. Probably halfway to Denver." "You're a terrible liar, Rourke. She's here somewhere with those copied pages. Important enough to kill for, apparently." "You don't understand," Kinbry snarled. "That network Mrs. Mira wants to expose is the only thing keeping order in these territories." "You mean without corruption, you'd have to do your job honestly?" Kinbry's face twisted with rage. "My job is maintaining stability. If that requires bending rules, so be it." A gunshot rang out from the hotel's 2nd floor, followed by shouts and breaking glass. Delane had found Judge Blackwood and trouble. "Kill him," Kinbry ordered, drawing his gun. The alley gunfight was brief but vicious. Ash took down one gunman, but the second man's bullet caught him in the ribs, spinning him into wooden crates. As Kinbry raised his gun for the killing shot, another voice cut through the night. "Marshal Kinbry!" Judge Blackwood stood in the hotel doorway, judicial robes billowing, smoking rifle in his hands. "I believe we need to talk." Behind the judge, Delane appeared with blood on her sleeve but alive. "Your Honor, I have evidence of federal corruption at the highest levels." Kinbry's face went pale. "Judge, these people are wanted criminals." "I've read Mrs. Mira's evidence," Blackwood interrupted, his voice carrying 30 years of judicial authority. "If even half is true, it's the largest corruption scandal in territorial history." Judge Blackwood examined Ash's wounds. "Mrs. Mira, help me get this man inside. Marshal Kinbry will discuss these allegations tomorrow, under oath in open court." Kinbry's hand moved toward his gun, but the judge's rifle was trained on him. "I wouldn't, Marshal." As they helped Ash into the hotel, Delane caught Kinbry's eye. "It's over. The truth is coming out." The long chase was finally nearing its end. The final battle came at sunset, with snow beginning to fall over Centerville. Kinbury's remaining men weren't going quietly. "Townspeople," Sheriff Danes called out, standing in the main street with his rifle ready. "These men are here to commit murder. Any man who stands with justice, stand with me now." Doors opened and armed citizens emerged. The general store owner, the blacksmith, even the elderly banker. Men who had heard about the corruption and decided enough was enough. The fighting was fierce but brief. Kinbury's hired killers were professionals, but they were outnumbered by aroused citizens defending their town. When the smoke cleared, 7 corrupt enforcers lay dead in the snow, and the rest had fled. But victory came at a cost. Ash's wound had reopened during the fight, leaving him pale from blood loss. "Need to get you to a doctor," Delane said, helping him toward the physician's office. "The notebook's safe," Jim Crawford announced, emerging with a bag full of documents. "Judge Blackwood's already signed warrants for every name on that list. This story's going to be in every paper from here to Washington." A week later, Circuit Judge Harrison Blackwood delivered his final ruling. He was a stern man with iron gray hair and 30 years of fighting frontier corruption. "Mrs. Mira," he said after reviewing all the evidence, "your husband died a hero's death in service of justice. This court declares all charges against you dropped, and warrants will be issued for every individual named in this documentation." The judge's gavel fell with the finality of justice served. Standing outside the courthouse with snow falling gently and Ash's wound finally healing, Delane felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. "So what now?" Ash asked. "Where do we go from here?" Delane looked at the man who had saved her life, fought beside her, and nearly died for her cause. He could have turned her in that first night. Instead, he had thrown away everything to help a stranger seek justice. "Maybe we don't run anymore," she said quietly. "Maybe we will find a place to build something new. Together." Ash smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since that night in the snow. "I know a valley 2 days' ride from here. Good water, good grazing, far enough for privacy but close enough to civilization. Sounds perfect." They mounted their horses and rode out together, leaving behind the courthouse where justice had been served and heading toward a future they would build with their own hands. The corruption network that had seemed so powerful was crumbling as arrests spread across 3 territories. The secret that had nearly killed them both had, in the end, set them free. Snow was falling more heavily, covering the streets in pristine white, erasing the bloodstains like a promise of new beginnings. "No regrets?" Ash asked. "None," she replied. "Some secrets are worth fighting for." They rode into the falling snow, 2 people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and discovered that sometimes the most dangerous journeys lead to the safest harbors. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.